Hello, my name is Mr. Polk and welcome to my kitchen. Today we'd like to take a look at a chocolate dessert. One method I'll show you is as more like an entremet, another way is more like a verrine, but it's a really nice fancy dessert that you can make at home. And it all starts with making a chocolate mousse. So to make the chocolate mousse, we're going to start with our bowl from our KitchenAid mixer, or you could use a bowl and use a hand mixer. And we're going to start with 2 cups of heavy cream, okay, and it's got to be the heavy cream. This won't work with milk or half and half. And then into that is going to go a cup of sugar. And I know it sounds like a lot of sugar, but it's also going to get a half a cup of cocoa powder. And if you've ever tasted 100% cacao cocoa powder that's not sweetened, you'll know that it's extremely bitter and it needs that sugar to give it a really nice flavor. Then the last thing it gets is about a tablespoon of vanilla. So we'll put the vanilla in there. Okay. And then this is going to go into our mixer. And we're going to mix it up to what we call stiff peaks. And we're going to do this in stages. Everybody that does this says, oh, I know how to get it. You just turn it right to number 10. No, you have to develop it, okay, because you're developing the air and the fat is holding the structure together. So first we go to stir and we just get all that cocoa powder together. Otherwise, if you didn't do that, the cocoa powder would start going everywhere. Then you can build yourself up. I'm going to build it up to about 2 or 3 and let that go around. In the meantime, I want to talk about what's going to go in here. You can just make, this chocolate mousse is like making a chocolate flavored whipped cream, all right, or a chocolate flavored chantilly. But we're going to want it to stabilize, meaning that we want it to hold up. So to do that in the baking business, we use gelatin. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to bloom the gelatin. So here I have a bowl of 1 tablespoon of water, and I have about a teaspoon and a half of unflavored gelatin. And what you do, it's like feeding a fish. You sprinkle it over top of the cold water. That's called blooming. And then you take a small spoon and you mix it up. And you let it bloom like that for a little bit. Because the gelatin is a powder, the blooming softens it, okay? Then once it's softened, then you're going to add 2 tablespoons of boiling water. Okay, so this water just came off of the stove. We'll put 1, we'll put 2. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be able to mix this, okay, and it's going to dissolve. If you just put it in the hot water as the dry powder, it doesn't dissolve. If you just tried to sprinkle the powdered gelatin into your mousse, it's not going to work right either. So now you can see that all of the chunks of the gelatin have been dissolved and this gelatin's ready to go. So you have to bloom it in a tablespoon of cold water and then 2 tablespoons of hot water to dissolve it. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the mixer cam and see what our mousse looks like. So here you can see it mixing around. It's approaching stiff peak. And now I can take it up to 8, and I'm getting a very nice stiff peak, and then I'm going to turn it off. Once you get this stiff peak, you have to be very careful, because when you whip cream, when you get to stiff peak, what happens is it's going to then, its next step is butter. And once it gets to butter, there's no undoing it, and you just have a mess. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take it back to stir, okay, and we're going to slowly pour in our gelatin mixture that has slightly cooled. And again, when the gelatin sets, it's going to stabilize the mousse so that it can't collapse. If you ever had whipped cream collapse, this is going to prevent that. So then we go through, we take it up to 2, to 4, up to 6, 8, and then we go back to 8. And what we're trying to do here is get it to stiff peak. And at stiff peak, do you see how it's leaving the trails behind? That's what we want. You see how glossy it looks? I'll even run it on 10. Everybody likes to go to high speed, but be very careful because you can ruin it at this point. At this point, I'm going to shut her down, and we're going to take a look, and you can see that we've got the stiff peak on the mousse. The mousse is very stiff. That's what we want. We don't want it to be droopy, okay, and sloppy, because this is going to now set up in the fridge, and it'll firm up very nicely once we make our verrine. So the biggest part about making either a chocolate entremet or a chocolate verrine is getting all your mise en place. So we just made the chocolate mousse, and I went ahead and put it in a bag. And you don't need a tip, just cut the end so you can pipe it. You could spoon it in too, or you could use a Ziploc bag. Then I also mixed up homemade chantilly, which would be fresh whipped cream, and that's doing the same process that I just did, except it would be 2 cups of heavy cream, 2 ounces of powdered sugar, and a tablespoon of vanilla. Now we need to make ganache, and we've made this before, but in the lab this time you will be making it. So I heated up my 6 to 7 ounces of cream, a tablespoon of butter, and then I've got 6 ounces of dark chocolate, 2 ounces of milk. And what I'm going to do is just let it sit for a minute and then start to whisk it. And remember, chocolate ganache is an emulsion, okay? So once the heat of the cream starts to melt the chocolate, it allows you to create an emulsion, just like we did with the salad dressing, or just like you would do if you were making mayonnaise. And when you make that, when you emulsify the fats, that's what gives you that wonderful texture that you see right now about ganache. And this is what we would call a soft ganache. Even when it sits at room temp, it's still kind of soft. If I would use less cream, then it would be a hard ganache, and that would be the center of your truffle candies. So this looks good. We're going to set this off to the side. And now we want to take a look at the cake. And the cake is our chocolate cake that we baked before, okay? And you want to do a couple things with it. We're going to take a little ring cutter, and we're going to cut as many circles as we can, all right? So I got 1, I got 2, I can get a 3rd, and then any leftover cake, okay, any leftover cake, you can simply take your knife and just try your best and cut it into cubes. And you'll be able to use that to make desserts as well. So it's okay if you don't have everything in the fancy shapes. I can just randomly cut this guy up into nice little cubes that I can work with. And now we want to take a look at setting up for the entremet. So now we want to make either the verrine or the entremet. If you're at home, you can easily make a verrine. Just get any kind of glass, something that looks fancy. I always like something with straight sides, or you could get like a martini glass, or anything you want. Anything that the person could eat the dessert out of is fine. And then here I'm going to show you how you could use a mold. Okay, you don't want to just put your cake in the mold like we did with the salad, because it's not going to come out. So I like to use these acetate collars, and I'm sure you're not going to have, if you're doing this at home, you're not going to have the acetate, and the lab will have it. But what you could do at home is you could use some wax paper and line it up inside something, or you could do it free form, like you could just use the cakes and stack them like a sandwich. That would be fine too. What I'm going to do is line this acetate up that it lines up nicely, and then I'm going to tape it right away. Sometimes I put it in and tape it last, but I find that on these taller ones I want to tape it first. And then slide this into the tube. Okay? Now whatever we do is covered by the acetate, and this is a tube, that's why I have to have it on a plate. You can see all the way through it. So we cut these with circle cutters, and then what you're going to do is I have to cut them bigger, otherwise they won't seal. So I have to put them in on an angle like that, okay, and then press it down. And I'm not squishing it like the salad, because this will hold itself up. I'm just kind of putting it in. And you can see I'll hold this up. You just do it, that it's flush to the bottom, and it looks nice inside. I'll put that back on there. Then we're going to use your chocolate mousse. And you're going to pipe mousse in just pretty much the thickness of the cake. Don't go too crazy. And at the same time, you could pipe some mousse in the bottom of your glasses. Now, we need to put in another layer of cake. So we're going to again go in on an angle and then bend down so it looks nice and flat. And then you can see that. And then on these guys, I could cut circles and jam them in, or I'm going to go ahead and put the chocolate cake in, just like that. Okay. And just press it down. You see how we're building the layers? And then the same thing over here. Put that in. And then you could get creative at this point if I wanted to. That ganache that you saw me make, I could easily take the bag. I got to cut the end. And I could easily, a little bit more, I could easily put, just a little bit of ganache. You could do a little ganache over there, give you some more flavor. And you could even do something that complements the chocolate. Maybe you have fresh raspberries, and maybe one of them you wanted to throw in a couple raspberries. Raspberries always complement the chocolate flavor. Okay, so we could do that. And then on this one, all right, the verrine, that's just going to get more chocolate mousse, the same thickness. And you don't have to, people are like, well, how do I get in there with a spatula? If you just squeeze it nice like I did, you don't have to use your piping skills, you just squeeze and it'll level itself out. And then on these, you can decide if you want another layer of cake. On this one, I'm honestly just going to fill it up with the mousse. On this one, I'm going to attempt to do a small layer and then just like some little pieces of cake in there. And then I'll finish it with mousse. And then look, I'm going right up to the edge of the glass. Okay, so that's one option. Or I'm going to take my ganache and I'm going to squirt it into the container and make a layer of ganache. And then all I do is I just kind of tap it and it just levels itself out. And then I can do the same thing in the glass. Go right to the edge there. Try not to get it on the glass, and then just to the center. And then give it a tap. And you don't have to get it too fancy because we're going to cover it. Okay, so this is the step of how we make it. And then now the glasses could be ready to go. We're going to garnish them in a minute. But the tube here definitely needs to set up so that we can unmold it. So now you can see we have the entremet finished, and we also have the verrines. The entremet, when it chills, you could pop it in the freezer for a little bit just so it gets enough to firm up. The chocolate ganache will firm up, and then cut the tape and peel the acetate collar off. And here you can see I plated it. And this is where, if you wanted to, you could just take your circles. And I do this if I'm in a hurry. I take my circles of cake, lay one down, a little mousse, another thing. But you just can't build as high. This will stay really nice. And then you can finish it. And you can also do this with the glasses. You can take either melted chocolate or you can put a little bit of the ganache. And I have these fancy squeegees, but you could just use a paintbrush or anything. And you just, make a design on the plate. And I'll be honest with you, when I do stuff that servers are going to be taking out, I'll do this with chocolate. And then I'll put the glass right on the chocolate or the ganache. And when that cools in the fridge, it acts like a glue, and the servers love it because stuff doesn't move around. Then you can top it with that chantilly we talked about. And this is the same rosettes we've been making for everything. And if you have some pieces of chocolate bar, I'll move this into the camera a little bit. If you have a piece of chocolate bar laying around, you can hold it up over top. You could use a grater, or I just like using my vegetable peeler, and it just makes little shavings on top. And then you can garnish it either with fruit, or if you have, like I showed you in other videos, how to make the little chocolate pieces, you could put a chocolate piece and you could put a nice little raspberry on there. And then you can decorate the rest of the plate. Maybe you do 2 little dots in chocolate mousse, so then maybe we do a tiny rosette in the white, and then just throw some fruit on there. I just have the reds here, but if you had some blueberries, you could do that. It just dresses it up. Maybe you put the other one this way, and then maybe 1 or 2 raspberries, just to kind of add some fun to it. And there you go. I mean, that's really how you can class up your dessert. And this one here could be done the same way. You can pipe right on top of the ganache like that. And maybe this one just gets a raspberry. So maybe this one just gets a raspberry like that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. So there you go. There you can see how we can take the chocolate cake that we made before. We can take ganache that we used before, the chocolate decorations, and just make it into a different style dessert. It can either go in to a fancy glass like this, all right, where you would just serve it, and then if you wanted to, you could step it up and plate it, or you could try and do the the entremet, where it's actually stacked and in the mold. And again, you could do that free form, and I usually call them either a free form or a rustic entremet. And the other option that you could do is you could make them like this, freeze them, then take the molds off, and then you could drizzle the whole thing in ganache, kind of like we did the cake. So those are some different options. So thank you for baking with me today, and I can't wait to bake with you real soon right here in Mr. Polk's kitchen.